Welcome back to the Abundant Harvest Homestead. I'm Papa Pepper. If you're not aware that being self-sufficient is something a lot of people do not want you to be able to accomplish, you're gonna have to need to pay a lot more attention, and maybe this video or channel isn't for you. What we try to do here is share information and tips, thoughts with people to help them kind of get their head right about the world that we're living in, to set them up for success in the present and in the future. There's been a lot of disruptions of a lot of things, and there's a lot of people talking about seed shortages starting and coming. And what I'm going to share in this video is 5 steps to survive any seed shortage. For a while now, we've been growing more and more of our own food. I actually sell seeds as part of the ways that we provide for our family. We save our own seeds, we store them. There's a lot of different things that if you understand, you're gonna set yourself up amazingly for the future. And just these 5 things, and I've got a special bonus at the end, but just these 5 things will help you survive any seed shortage. My first tip is as simple as it is important. The first tip I'm going to tell you is get them now. Acquire any seed you're going to want to grow right now. I know it's end of summer, beginning of fall type time. So we're in August here. I know it's not time to be planting a lot of stuff, but if you have something you want to plant next spring or next summer, I would highly recommend getting those seeds now. Why? Because things can be easily disrupted. One way to guarantee that you have something is to have it in your possession. For a lot of your life, you were just able to order it from a catalog or go to a store and buy it. These days we use the internet, but sometimes different restrictions change, sometimes different availabilities change. I like to remind people often, a couple years ago, there were many stores you could walk up to, see a packet of seeds on the shelf, and they said that is a non-essential item, you cannot buy it. They would have it there at the store, and they would not sell it to you. To me, that's an issue. That's one reason why, if I've got something I want to grow next year, I want to be buying those seeds now and getting them into my possession. That guarantees that if any disruption happens in the future, I'm already fine because I already have them in my own care. That's incredibly important. Check out all this dill right here. Very few of the seeds are left on these dill heads because they're falling to the ground and reseeding themselves. We're not even gardening this year, but a lot of stuff is growing up of its own. And these dill heads here are one example of stuff just doing its life cycle. I'll get to a little bit of this shortly. The second tip I have for you is to grow each type of plant you want at least every other year. So if you have seeds, what you're going to want to do is to make sure if you didn't plant a plant, this year, that you plant it next year. That's going to create a fresh cycle for you, and that's going to be very important as we get into the next one. But if you have stuff you want to grow it at least every other year. One of the reasons for that is that seeds are only good for so long. If you have a seed stored and you wait 4 or 5 years to grow it, the germination rate is going to be significantly reduced with most type of crops. We'll get into seed storage in a minute too, but something like cucumbers, a lot of times people guess about 10 years they're going to be good for. Other ones, if you don't use them in the first 3 or 4 years, you really don't have them anymore. So even if you think, oh, I got these seed packets, this is great, I'm set up, I would highly, highly recommend that you're growing every variety that you want at least every other year. Some you may grow every year, but don't let it go 3, 4, 5 years before you plant your seeds. Plant them at least every other year for the varieties that you want to have and that you want to keep. Here on our homestead, we like to have nice mulched paths with raised beds where we can have our plants grow. But every once in a while, you get a volunteer like this, I think it's Siam Queen Basil. And she's volunteering outside of the garden bed. So last year, I'm guessing there was some planted up here. With our tomatoes, we had an amazing crop of tomatoes last year. And basil's a good one to companion plant with that, but when it was growing here, it went to seed. Seed fell in the pathway, and now this one grew up. Look, it's going to seed again, so we're gonna let that do it, and maybe it'll jump back on that side of the border for next year's crop. Tip number 3 is learn how to save your own seeds. I like to say that, these plants are built with the information that they need to have life cycles. They want to live, they want to grow. Some are incredibly easy to propagate by just cutting into pieces and shoving back in the soil. Some go to seed. So they will flower often, then they will fruit, and then they will have seeds in that fruit. They have the same type of seeds in that fruit to grow that parent plant. Now, because of cross-pollination, it may not always be the same exact, but it's going to be very similar often to the adult or the parent plant. And if you really want to make sure you're keeping things of their own kind, don't plant a bunch of different kinds of tomatoes next to each other or a bunch of different kinds of peppers next to each other. A lot of people recommend giving them at least 50 feet between different varieties to keep your seeds true to kind. Learning how to save seeds is so wise for a number of reasons. Number 1, it's cost effective. You should never have to buy seeds again if you learn how to save seeds. Here's an example. It's actually for a different one of these points, but this is red mustard green seeds. That's a lot more than I started with back in like 2016, and I've got like a lifetime supply if I'm doing it wise. I should never need to buy that type of seed again. Moreover, if I take the plants that are doing the best on my property and I save seeds from those ones, then the best that are, drought tolerant or really well compatible with our soil here, or can do best in the heat that I have, or whatever is in my climate and in my area that causes these particular ones, say you got 14 and 2 of them do amazing, well, save the seeds from those ones doing amazing, because what you're going to do is you're going to plant then their offspring, and the strongest that do the best in your area are going to be the ones that are having the crops next year. By doing this, you have seeds that are better suited for your area, and it's kind of almost like a customized pack, because they're the ones that for generations now are thriving on your property. If you just plant some from a seed company, half a country away, they're going to be the ones that are doing well in their area. It's not that they're not going to grow, but they're going to be much better suited to be from where they were from, rather than where you're introducing them to. So saving your own seeds, that's one of the incredible things about it, is you get better and better crops each year because it's the healthiest plants that are producing the offspring. And a lot of times it's hard to do to have, your perfect pepper, the one that looks the best out of them all, it's the biggest out of them all. Well, you let that one get past ripe to make sure that those seeds are fully mature. Or you get your best head of broccoli and you're like, oh, this looks so amazing, but if you don't pick it, it goes to flower and then it goes to seed, and you have to kind of sacrifice sometimes with certain vegetables the one that you really wanted, because that's going to make the best offspring. Sometimes, like with a pepper, you may get to eat it too, or a tomato, you get to eat it and save the seeds, but sometimes you have to actually sacrifice the plant. And one thing too, with planting every other year at least, some plants are biennials. There's certain ways to force some of them, but some plants are just designed to be biennials. If I plant carrots this year, and I let them go, and I don't pick them, then they're going to wake up in the spring. Often they'll be the tallest plants in my garden in the spring, where all that power they have stored in the roots starts shooting up, and they put out these big flower heads, and then they go to seed. But it happens the second year. The blue curly Scotch kale here, which out of all the kale varieties we've tried, that's the one that works best for us. I've had that sometimes for 7 or 8 seasons, where I'll plant it at the end of winter, and then it goes through the spring, the summer, the fall, the winter, the spring, and then the summer, and by that fall, it's producing amazing seeds. It went through almost 2 years worth of growing. Not that it's technically a biennial, but that can happen too. So learn to work with the plants that you're trying to grow, learn how to save the seeds for them, pick the biggest and strongest ones, kind of start selecting the ones that get you the best crops to be growing on your property of that kind, and you'll be reducing your cost, you'll be growing better plants, and you'll probably have extra, which is one of the reasons we give a lot away, we sell a lot, and then we also trade with people. Here's an example here. We've got a volunteer tomato falling over into the pathway. This looks like some arugula that's just going to seed. And then this one here, this big one in the middle, is going to be one of the mustard greens. So these mustard greens, each of these packets used to be a flower. Now it's probably got about a dozen little balls in there that are seeds. They're going to fall back to the soil and come up again next year. Then we got some clary sage growing back in there too, and some more arugula, along with some wild common yellow wood sorrel. But this is what happens. I didn't eat this. We weren't eating it this year, but it fully went to seed. It's drying out now, and it's gonna fall back to the soil and make next year's crop really completely hands off, which leads me into my next one. Now, I'm not sure I've heard anyone talk about this one before, but it's saving seeds over your growing area. For us, it's over our raised beds. That's where I like to save the seeds. If I was collecting the seeds from that mustard green I just showed you, I would break off the stems when they're nice and dry. It's raining right now, but when they're nice and dry, I'd break off the stems, and I would probably get a large bowl, and I'd just kind of grind them up like this and let all the seeds fall into that bowl. But while I'm doing it, it's kind of a sloppy process. Some will be hopping off to the sides. The ones that hop off to the sides are going to plant themselves back in that garden bed. And what this does is it really mimics the natural way that things happen. Normally you'd have a plant grow up, it would make its seeds. If they're seeds like, dandelions, a lot of lettuce seeds are like that. They may blow around and land different places. If they're heavier seeds like the mustard greens, they'll just fall right to the ground. If there's something like a jewelweed, a member of the impatiens family, that seed pod will just kind of pow, and the seeds will go flying. But for a lot of them, they just fall to the ground right where they were. By saving my seeds over the garden bed, even if something happens to my seed supply, I have a greater possibility of having that next generation come up. A lot of the places we grow mustard greens and save the seeds for them, they come back year after year. It's really hands off. I don't even need to tap into my reserve seed supply to get the next year's harvest, because they reseeded themselves by me saving the seeds over the garden bed. That gives me my supply to just continue to store, like I'm doing with this one, or, sell, trade, barter, have extra on hand for the future. It works out really well. So the fifth tip to survive any seed shortage is to store your seeds properly. Generally speaking, there's three things that are going to cause your seeds to deteriorate faster or you to lose your supply, and that's going to be heat, sunlight, and moisture, and I'm going to add pests to that as well. Right now in this jar, I have these seeds. There's certain moths and beetles and other things that will eat these seeds, even sometimes in a paper envelope or a plastic bag, because they can bite through that to get to the seeds and then start a life cycle in there. A glass jar is going to be a lot better. And I wouldn't even have this glass jar out here right now because there's a slight drizzle if these seeds were, in a paper envelope or a plastic bag. This jar makes me feel a little bit better about it. If it was a downpour, I wouldn't. But proper seed storage. Find a cool, dry, dark place to store your seeds, and you're going to have the greatest germination rate as you move forward. They're going to stay viable for longer. And one thing to consider too is even to store your seeds in multiple places. Okay? Heat, moisture, and sunlight. Sometimes moisture, a flood could happen. If a flood comes and gets your seed supply, you're done. Heat, sometimes a fire could happen. And if that gobbles up your seed supply, you're done. So one thing that I recommend is even having it in multiple places. Split your seeds that you're saving and maybe store them in multiple places. That's just a recommendation, but I think that there are some good reasons where if you're really trying to make sure that you have a seed supply, you may want to do that. And consider that to be part of proper seed storage, just having it in multiple locations, which is a great segue into the bonus I have for you guys. And that bonus is going to be to work with others. I know some people who try to grow a really good type of corn, for instance, and they don't want any of their neighbors growing some inferior corn that's going to cross-pollinate with theirs and have the seeds that they save for the next year be worse. So they'll take their really good corn and they'll give seeds for that away for free to all the neighbors within a reasonable range, that they secure kind of the pollination of their next generation. That's pretty wise. With storing in another location, sometimes this is where another person can come in handy. If you have a friend, and especially neighbor, just because then the travel isn't as much of an issue because they're so close by, but it may be a friend or a family member, even halfway across the country, somewhere else, have that seed supply kind of spread out. And if you're both working on having that same variety for coming generations, there's a better opportunity that you're going to have that to plant every year because you have that variety, and so does your friend, whether it's next door or somewhere else. They have that same variety, and you guys are each trying to save your own seeds, grow them at least on an every other year basis, store them properly, save your seeds when it makes sense over the garden beds. You know, if you're both doing that at the same time, it's going to work better. So work with others. And sometimes you can even do this like, hey, I'm really growing this one. It works really well. I see you have that. That works really well. Can we switch some and I'll try growing both of these? You can try growing both of these, or, you know, help other people out. And you may even be in a situation where, say you don't have acreage. Say you're looking for the future. And in the future, you want to be able to do these things. Then start now. Get those seeds in hand. Maybe it's just planting some pots alongside your house or in a flower bed. I know some people who've grown like different types of peppers and planted flowers next to it just to kind of disguise it because they, you know, weren't supposed to have a garden, but flowers were okay. So they just kind of mixed them in there to make sure they had them there. Maybe it's growing some pots in your balcony, or maybe it's working with somebody just outside of your city or in a different location in your city who's growing something. Maybe it's somebody working with a community garden, or they have their own property, and you may make friends with them, talk to them, be like, look, in the future, I would like to have my own place. I'd like to have the freedom to grow something like this. Right now, I can't. Could I possibly maybe help you exchange some labor for some opportunity? Could I maybe help you, learn from you, work next to you? Maybe, you know, 2 hours a week I'll try to be out here, but could we also grow this variety or these kinds of seeds here just so I can save the seeds and have fresh ones for next year? You may be able to work something like that out, and the more people you know in your area who are doing things like that, often the more people you know in your area who have their heads on their shoulders right and are going to be an asset as opposed to like a deficit for you. So that's all I got for you this time, guys. Those are 5 different tips that should help you survive any coming seed shortage. There's probably a few things that I might have missed. If you've got some, leave them in the comment section below. Feel free to head down there and see what other people are saying. But to me, if you did those 5 things, you should be set. There's a lot of stuff that I don't think I'll ever have to fear for again, just because of how much it reproduces here. Once I started saving my own seeds and storing them properly, the plants I was growing started growing way better. I wound up with such an overabundance of everything, so many more seeds than I could ever, you know, possibly plant. But that's one thing too. If you got mustard seeds, seeds for cilantro, coriander, those are also good for seasoning. Dill seeds too. You can use them as a seasoning and something to flavor stuff with. I love putting these in our homemade sausages. So seeds don't just come in handy for growing. There's other uses too, and if you've got a crazy amount, it's that much easier. I wouldn't want to go down to the garden center and pick up a small packet for, you know, $3-4, open that up and dump that out to make a sausage out of. But if I save my own, it's so much easier to have that type of supply on hand. I hope this helps. Hope it bless you guys, and if you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe. This channel's got a lot of variety on it, but there's some undertones to it that you can usually find in about every video. I'll see you next time. Papa out.
Thank you for watching. Hit the red button. Thumbs up. But well.
The cow head is good?
Yeah.
That's because you know.